Well, we recently looked at the Enduro SE, and though it is plastic fantastic, we found it to be surprisingly capable. 5 out of 6 problems. Now, it's been a few months since we looked at the Deadbolt, but it is also similarly decked out in plastic. These two are actually really similar rigs, and a few of you said in the comments that a head-to-head might be an idea. So that's what we're doing today. These are the two most budget rigs in Element RC and Axial stable. They're both 110. This one has a slightly longer wheelbase, this one has ball bearings. They're actually quite similar, mid-mounted transmissions, similar kind of steering setup, but there are some key differences. Let's go over them really quickly, then we'll put them together on the rocks and see which one is the king. This is the Deadbolt's radio, this is the Enduro SE's radio. This is a new change for Element. They've changed to FlySky, and if you haven't seen our review, check it out here. This is actually one of my favorite little radios. They're both 4 AA batteries, but the FlySky gives you considerably more leeway for trimming, and it's got the extra 2 channels that this fella just doesn't have. However, you do have a throttle limiter on the Spectrum system. They're both comfortable in the hand, they're both lightweight, and they both have available receivers, so you can pair them with other cars as well. And we're going to put this under personal preference. I would call that a tie. When it comes to the bodies, things get a bit more interesting. The Deadbolt, of course, gives you something of an interior. Driver, dashboard, steering wheel, and we've got the attractive roll bars, even the lights up top, which can be populated. This is a lightweight body. It's got the boat side finish on it. So this is actually more of a competition oriented machine. So if that's what you're into, then the Deadbolt might make more sense. Then we get the cheapest ever Enduro body, which is the Sendero. But as we discussed in the review recently, it's a 1-piece, not a 2-piece. This is more of your old style truck. And if you like scale, then this is the clear choice, but there's no interior. Windscreens are clear though, so you can actually populate it if you like, if you're into 3D printing. There will also be interiors available from various companies. I think Killer Bodies does one that'll give you a 2 front seat and a dash, but they're not that cheap, and we are talking about cheap models. For me, I think the Deadbolt's a clear winner here. The body's not for everybody, but it just is a thoroughly complemented setup, whereas this really is just your painted Lexan. It's attractive enough, but that's a big standout for me. Right, let's get to the trucks. That's the main point. You're not even looking at me. We're going to disable that. I don't like it. Here's where it gets interesting, and here is really why you're watching. This is the Deadbolt. This is the Enduro SE. Now these are both mid-mounted transmissions. This is actually the best setup for crawling. But these guys are actually fairly different, even though they have a very similar setup. Let's look at the stuff that's the same first, because this is really what got a lot of you guys thinking about this. The noodly links provide the kind of flexibility that might sound good on paper, but as much as it might save you from a rock strike, I mean, nobody really wants to see the thing deforming like that. I know from experience that it will protect components, particularly it'll protect your shafts and whatnot if you happen to grab a rock up under the body, but getting to stainless steel is a plus. Now, as well as having behind the axle steering, the Enduro SE also employs stainless steel drag link and steering link. This is actually a very good thing, and it keeps the steering very positive. Compare that to the Deadbolt, which still has the noodly links. Even your steering can get kind of pulled out of the way. I'm really not a fan of that. And we saw in the review, now I think about it, we were on some of the challenging problems here, and they just popped like that. So this would be one of the very first things to replace, this stainless steel link. Thankfully they're cheap. It's a shame it didn't come out of the box. They both have floating center drive shafts with CVDs at each end, which are steel. And the only other difference to mention is, although neither of them have overdrive, the Element lets you do it with extra gears. This one is just how it is. This is the same SEX10-2 transmission I think we've seen for 6 or 7 years at this point. This is a 3-pole motor, it's snappy. The Element comes with a 5-pole motor, so it's smoother at low speed, but it lacks the same punch the 35-turn 3-pole has here. The electronics are both pretty solid. They're waterproof metal gear servos. They both fade under heavy load, and both bodies have the same C-channel steel chassis. So these are both good, solid machines. Here's where things get a little bit more interesting for me, at least. With regards to tuning, your suspension is adjustable. You do have plastic shock barrels on both of these cars, but notice how that we don't have adjustability on the Enduro. It is just simply set, and the coilover spring is just over the shaft, whereas this has your more traditional setup with the thumb screws, so you can add preload if you want to change the ride height. You can actually change that on the Enduro, but that's a win for Axial in my book. The battery location is another performance-oriented thing to note here. It's over the front axle here on the Deadbolt, whereas the Enduro SE has it mid-mounted. One nice thing about the Enduro though is that it does come with the stubby battery holder, And like one of you said in the comments last video, we can actually mount that up the front, and getting that over the front axle would be really good for having that weight up front. So a positive weight bias would be beneficial. You may have noticed while I was talking, because this is going to be a major one for some of you guys, we've got axle mounted steering on the Enduro SE. It's chassis mounted on the Deadbolt. And you know what makes this whole comparison quite interesting? Everything else we've discussed with regards to tuning, the Deadbolt seems to be winning on performance, but we actually have those axle mounted servo on the Element, which really for me puts it ahead. Tires are 4.7. Now you're probably going to change these yourself because they're pencil thin. These are directional, these are not. These are actually softer. I'm actually quite interested to see how these two go. The breakover angle on the Deadbolt is slightly better, but otherwise, these are two very similar rigs. The last thing to mention is we've got our wheel wells and sliders on the Enduro. I've been thinking about this because the value for money is really there for both of them. This is $40 US more than this. You get more scale truck in this machine, but where's the performance lie? If you want to find out, stick around. We're going to get these on the rocks now and we will see. Let's do it. Okay, it's the Deadbolt first. Time is on. We're going to compare time, and we're going to compare, let's say, how many reverses or rollovers we've had. So just loose competition rules today. One reverse. I haven't driven the Deadbolt for a while, but I can already tell you the steering's worse than I remember. It's slower. It's a bit slower than I'd like. And those tyres aren't hooking up. Pull that 2 reverses. And I'll put a 5-minute time limit on this track. Tyres don't hook up, do they? So although these actually felt similar in the hand, the tyres on the Enduro SE actually are quite a bit softer. Harder tyre compounds are fine on a heavier rig, but because both of these rigs are really quite lightweight, traction is a little lower than I'd like on the Deadbolt here. If you're wondering, these are both bone stock cars. They're both running on 2S today. And my mum's down here visiting, so you've got her steady hand helping with cameras. Hi Mum. Okay. Alright, so we're coming up to the harder part, and both these rigs are going to struggle here. You'll notice I haven't got my tennis ball markers out today. Basically just going to punt all things on the same course. There's a 3rd reverse, 4th reverse actually, 5th reverse. You might need to take a chicken track. For you. Breakover angle on these 2 rocks in particular is important, and there are many trucks that actually get caught up right here. Just like that. Actually, I thought the Deadbolt had it. Nope, wherever. So that's not recoverable. So we've had 4 reverses, 5 reverses, and a rollover. There we go. Nope. That servo is struggling. 6 reverses. I'm going to reset that. 6 reverses, a rollover, and a reset. And we're at 3 minutes 10. There we go. The servo's hanging in there, but it just feels like it's struggling. It could be a function of just low voltage, I'm not sure. I think on this machine, if this was my daily driver, the first thing I'd probably change would be stainless steel steering link setup. And a better servo. And across the line in 3 minutes 46. Come on, man. Come on, man. All right, that's the Deadbolt. Now let's do the Enduro. Thanks, Mum. Beautiful.
It was fun.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to do it again for the other car. Right, we had the Deadbolt in 3:46. We had 6 reverses, a rollover, and a reset. Time is on for the Enduro SE. I mentioned a 5-pole motor before. This guy doesn't have the same explosive punch as the 3-pole of the Deadbolt, but it's got wonderful low-speed control, and I can already tell you, stock servo to stock servo, this thing has better throw and a better feel out of the box. There's actually no comparison. This is so North America. Yes, it's a cheapie, but my goodness, this is actually nicer to drive. The other one actually would benefit, if you're talking about upgrades for the Deadbolt, consider getting a slightly smaller pinion if you can. Drop a tooth on the pinion and you'll get a better crawler at the cost of top speed. There's our one reverse. You'll also notice we got over this on the first attempt. I was looking at these closely before. So the transmission on this car is lower, considerably lower than the Deadbolt. 2 reverses. The breakover is actually better on the Deadbolt, believe it or not. Its motor is lower than this, but everything else in this car is lower. I haven't tested them on a side hill, but I suspect we're going to find a very similar center of gravity. I'm also seeing these tyres are deforming nicely where the Deadbolt wasn't. This is actually an easier crawl than the Deadbolt. Again, I think the gearing plays a fairly significant role in that. Honestly, the steering feel is so much better. If you were going to buy one of these and not upgrade it at all, I would say the decision's actually quite a lot easier. Comparing them side by side, the Element is a much nicer car to drive. Now remember, this has ball bearings through it. This has bushings through it. The Deadbolt has not just ball bearings, but sealed ball bearings. It's actually it's actually not a big a deal as you might think of it. Bearings really matter on a fast car. These are slow cars. 4 through. Couldn't get the Deadbolt over this one. It's reverse. Alright, we might. 6 reverse, we might take the 6 traffic light. Rock sliders doing their job here. That's something that the Deadbolt doesn't have. But one thing I'm noticing that is in the Deadbolt's favour. Hang on, I forgot where the track was. I need to cut it. Is this really attractive wide bumper is getting on the way. And the Deadbolt just doesn't. But no reset, no manual rollovers. Now remember the Deadbolt got stuck here on the breakover, on the skid. We're going to warp it first and see. Yeah. Eight reverses. I thought for sure that would be it. You notice the motor is stalling out. 9 reverses. 10 reverses. Oh dear. Alright. You can always move back a bit more if you're having trouble keeping the thing in frame. There we go. Well done. Doing a good job. Gosh, this is actually quite challenging. So as much as I like the positive feel of this car, the Deadbolt was easier to just hop over this point. Lost count of this, I think we're at 13. Neither of them have mirrors and wipers or all that guff. They are really bare bones machines. And remember also that this car is $40 cheaper than the Deadbolt. We had to limit a bit, but we're across the line in 4:47, a full minute and 10 seconds slower. Well, there you have it. The Deadbolt managed all of that in only 7 reversals or so, I think, and we had 13 or 14 with the Enduro SE. However, we had a manual rollover and a manual reset, and we didn't have anything with that. If this was competition scoring, even though this thing took a whole minute and 10 seconds more than the Deadbolt to complete it, it would score considerably better, like what, 15, 14, 13, 11 points more. And in a competition setting, if you guys have followed my channel for a while, you'll know that may as well be all the points. That's a lot of points. This thing crawled better. Mum told me it sounded lower when we were driving it, and yeah, I agree. Being a 3-pole motor, it's more immediate, but it also lacks that low-speed buttery control that is typical of the entire Enduro platform. If you've been following my channel for the last year or two, you'll know that I'm a fan of this platform. I do actually have an equal or near equal number of Axial and Element RC cars. They both make good stuff. Don't let the bushings put you off on this. Having servo on axle and a lovely low center of gravity combined with, I think, a better quality steering system and low speed control makes this, in my hand at least, a better crawler. But both of these absolutely can be upgraded. But if you're buying these, chances are you're on a budget. Because if you want to get a nicer crawler from Axial, even just one step up is the base camp, but it gives you the metal links, so goodbye to the noodles underneath. You don't get an interior, but you do get a better all-round car in my opinion. But this thing even might give the base camp a run for its money. But then the noodly links will start to stand out a bit more. Given that these are still pretty similar cars, this might for you come down to personal preference. What kind of body do you like better? Competition style thing or a bit more scale? There's certainly latitude to upgrade both of these to your heart's content, and absolutely there's heaps and heaps of aftermarket support for both of them. The Axial, I think, having been around for a few years longer than the Element, I mean, if you just look up SEX10-2, you'll find a shopping list full. You can fill a cart with brass and whatever else. My one tip to you guys would be, beef up the steering, consider a Fusion SE, potentially if you want to get better power and still keep that nice crawling control, but don't go crazy with weight. They'll both benefit from a little bit of brass in the front just to bias that front down. In this guy in particular, move the battery forward where the servo would otherwise have been. There's a plate there for it, but otherwise keep the weight low. If you're going to add nicer tires and wheels, consider lighter wheels and just put the brass on the front. That will be my tip for crawling this thing well. Look, they're both brilliant trucks. You can find a link to both of them down in the description, and I'll also stick just a few basic upgrades that I would recommend just for stage 1 mods, let's say. I've got a playlist for both of these cars on my channel already. Have a look in the description for that as well. And as always, thank you so much for joining me. I'll catch you next time on RC-TNT. Cheers. Well, we recently looked at the Enduro SE, and we found that it's plastic fantastic, but still surprisingly capable. Good. I'm recording, Mum. Well, we recently looked at the